The elevator in my building broke for the fourth time in 8 months. No repair crew, no notice, just a handwritten sign that said out of service, under review. That same week, I found out where $3 million in maintenance fees had actually gone. 7 board members, a climate-controlled warehouse, and 14 Italian supercars. Here's the question I need you to hold the entire time you watch this. If you found out the people managing your home were driving on your money, would you know how to stop them? Because I did, and it nearly cost me everything first. 3 moments from this story I still think about at night. The first, opening an audit report and finding a $400,000 line item for emergency structural disbursement with no work order, no contractor, no photos, just a number and a date. The second, standing in a warehouse I was never supposed to find, looking at 14 cars that cost more than most people earn in a lifetime, knowing my name was on the receipt. The third, watching a board member's face go completely blank when I placed a photograph of a red Lamborghini on the table in front of him at the annual meeting and said nothing. That last moment, that one was free. I'd lived in the Clearwater Towers complex for 6 years. Mid-rise building, decent neighborhood, the kind of place you buy when you want to own something real without leaving the city. I work in financial compliance. I read documents other people don't want to read, contracts, ledgers, audit trails. I notice things. When I moved in, my maintenance fee was $800 a month. It had gone up twice. The second increase in late 2024 was described in a board letter as capital improvement reserves and structural remediation costs. I looked around my building, same lobby carpet from when I moved in. Open drainage issues in the parking garage since 2023. Gym equipment never replaced. Rooftop terrace closed indefinitely. So I requested the financials. I'm not someone who makes noise. I don't file complaints every week. I pay my bills and keep my head down. But when a number doesn't match the reality in front of me, I cannot let it go. That request for the financial records of a residential property board started a process that took 11 months, involved 2 lawyers, 1 forensic accountant, and the state attorney general's office. And it ended in criminal indictments in June 2026. The board had 7 members. At the center was Gerald Holt, 9 consecutive years as president. He wore suits to every meeting and had one phrase for anyone who asked a question he didn't want to answer. He said, "That's already been addressed in the reserve study." Nobody ever asked to see the reserve study. His 2 closest allies, Dennis Kwan, a former real estate broker, and Patricia Solano, who ran a property management consulting firm. Patricia's firm was also the board's vendor for administrative services. She was billing the HOA through a company she controlled and voting to approve her own invoices. The detail I associate with Gerald is simple: a Lamborghini key fob posted on his Instagram in early 2024, tagged at an automotive event in Miami. He'd captioned it, "New Chapter." The residents of Clearwater Towers were funding that chapter. They had no idea. Here's what most homeowners don't know, and it's why this fraud is so common and so hard to catch. HOA boards are not required to publish itemized financial statements to all residents. They must make them available upon request, but the process is buried in governing documents, and boards can legally charge fees for document production. Many make it expensive enough that residents don't bother. Reserve funds have the same vulnerability. Boards have broad discretionary authority over that money. A majority board vote can authorize payments to vendors of their choosing for projects described however they want in the minutes, with no independent oversight unless a resident specifically demands it. The fraud playbook is almost always identical. You create a vendor, you awarded a contract for something vague, infrastructure assessment, emergency structural analysis, capital consulting. The vendor invoices the HOA, the board approves, the money moves. On paper, everything is legitimate, unless someone cross-references vendors, dates, and actual work performed. That cross-referencing is exactly what I do for a living. I paid the $300 document production fee without argument. I sat down one Saturday morning with a spreadsheet and 4 years of HOA disbursements. The same 6 vendors appeared repeatedly. all incorporated within 18 months of Gerald taking the presidency. No verifiable addresses, no websites, no contractor licenses. Two shared the same registered agent. The reserve fund, which should have held approximately $1.8 million, had a balance of just under $200,000. $1.6 million paid to vendors that did not exist for work that was never done. I want to stop and ask you something directly. When did you last actually read your HOA's financial statements? Not the fee notice, the actual disbursements, vendor list, reserve fund balance. Drop a number in the comments. 1 if you've never looked, 2 if you've checked once, 3 if you review them regularly. Because what I found in this building is not unusual. Most people just never look. I brought what I'd found to my neighbor Clara, retired school teacher, 11 years in the building. She had tried to raise financial questions at board meetings before and been dismissed every time. She said, "I've been saying something was wrong for years." Gerald looked at me like I was speaking another language. I said, "I need help getting other residents involved. But we talk to a lawyer first before we say a word to the board." She said, "How bad is it?" I said, "Bad enough." My attorney reviewed the documents and confirmed the patterns were consistent with systematic fraud, not accounting errors. Then she said something that changed the direction of everything. She said, "These structures often involve vehicles or real property purchased outside normal channels. Do you have access to their personal financial disclosures?" I didn't, but I knew where to look. The annual meeting was 6 weeks away. I had a choice: confront the board privately or build the complete case before they knew I was coming. I chose to build the case. That decision is the reason we won. My attorney filed a formal records request with the county, vehicle registration records for all 7 board members. Gerald Holt had registered 4 vehicles in 3 years: a Lamborghini Huracan, a Ferrari Roma, a Porsche 911 Turbo, and a limited edition Pagani Huayra, base price over $3 million, on a salary he'd never disclosed for a volunteer position. Dennis Kwan, 2 vehicles, Patricia Solano, 3, 14 high-performance cars across 7 board members, all acquired in a 38-month window, perfectly aligned with the period of fee increases and reserve fund drainage. We cross-referenced purchase dates against disbursement records. In 11 out of 14 cases, a large vendor payment had occurred within 60 days of the vehicle acquisition. The money wasn't just being stolen, it was being converted into physical assets with high resale value. My attorney contacted the State Attorney General's office. They already had the file open. A whistleblower from inside one of the fake vendor entities had come forward 6 months earlier. They'd been waiting for a resident with documented standing. We were exactly what they needed. At this point, we had fake vendors, drained reserves, and 14 luxury cars. What we didn't have was the physical location. Everything we documented was financial, paper, numbers. The break came from a comment section. A resident named Mel ran a private Facebook group for the building. Mostly noise, parking complaints, recycling debates. But in 2024, someone had posted a photo taken from a car window, driving past a large industrial unit on the edge of the city. The caption, "Spotted Gerald's car going in here last weekend. Anyone know what this place is?" 4 likes, 2 comments, then everyone moved on. I found it searching the group archives. I sent the screenshot to my attorney. 3 days later, an investigator drove past the address. Climate-controlled storage and display facility, the kind used for collector vehicles. A subpoena produced the lease, registered under one of the fake vendor entities. Inside, 14 cars in showroom condition. Combined assessed value, $4.2 million, against a reserve deficit of $3.1 million. The gap was Patricia. Her consulting firm had billed the HOA for property management services at $22,000 a month for 4 years, services that were entirely fictional. While she was billing for nothing, the East Wing fire suppression system had been flagged in a 2023 safety inspection. Remediation required within 90 days. No plan was ever filed, no repairs made. 3 elderly residents in that wing had been living with a compromised fire suppression system for 2 years. When I found that, I had to stop working. I went for a walk, I came back, and I finished the file. The annual meeting was in March. The AG's office had confirmed indictments were imminent but not yet served. They asked us not to tip off the board, so we went to the meeting as if nothing had changed. Gerald opened with a slide about continued financial strength and a short video about upcoming landscaping improvements. I sat in the third row with a printed binder on the table in front of me. When he opened the floor, I raised my hand. He said, "Go ahead." I said, "I'd like to ask about the reserve fund balance." He said, "It's addressed in last month's financial summary. The reserve stands at approximately $200,000. I said, "I know. I'd like to know where the other $1.6 million went." The room went silent. He said, "The reserve has been drawn down for capital projects, as communicated to residents." I said, "Which projects?" Because I have 4 years of disbursements here and I cannot find a single work order, completion certificate, or contractor license for any vendor who received over $50,000 from this association. He looked at Dennis Kwan. Dennis looked at the table. I opened the binder. I placed the photograph on the table. The Lamborghini, registered in Gerald's name, purchased 60 days after a $300,000 disbursement to a vendor with no employees and a P.O. box address. I said nothing. Gerald said nothing. The room was still. The meeting ended without a vote on anything. Gerald and Dennis left quickly. Patricia stayed in her seat, looked at the photograph, then left without speaking. 2 weeks later, the indictments came down. Gerald Holt, wire fraud, embezzlement, breach of fiduciary duty, conspiracy. Dennis Kwan and Patricia Solano, identical charges. 3 other board members, lesser offenses as co-conspirators. The state seized the warehouse and all 14 vehicles. In May 2026, the collection went to public auction. The Pagani alone sold for $2.8 million. Total proceeds $3.9 million, enough to cover the reserve deficit and fund the East Wing fire suppression repairs in full. I watched the auction live stream from my apartment. When the gavel came down on the Lamborghini, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not triumph, something quieter. I thought about the couple on the 14th floor who'd skipped a vacation because they couldn't afford both the fee increase and the travel. The woman on 6 who'd been told her balcony repairs weren't in the capital queue. None of us signed up for this. We just bought apartments. The final numbers. One more challenge. This week, not someday, look up your HOA's most recent financial statement. Find the reserve fund balance. Find the top 5 vendors, Google every single one, tell me in the comments what you find. Gerald ran 9 years of annual meetings where nobody asked a hard question, not because residents didn't care, because they assumed someone else was watching. Nobody was. The final numbers, $3.1 million stolen, 112 homeowners affected, average financial impact per unit, $27,000. The East Wing fire suppression repairs, $460,000. Completed October 2026. The 3 residents who'd lived in that section unprotected were offered a formal written apology from the new board. 2 accepted. The third, Dorothy, 81 years old, 20 years in her unit, said she didn't want an apology. She wanted a plaque in the lobby with the names of every board member who had voted to drain that fund while the East Wing sat exposed. The new board voted to do it. I don't live there anymore. I moved out 6 months after the indictments, not because I was forced to, because I needed a change. But I think about Dorothy, about what it means to have the people responsible for keeping your home safe treat it like a fund they could access whenever they wanted something fast and expensive. There's a specific kind of betrayal in that. It's not abstract, it's your home. So, the question from the beginning, if you found out the people managing your home were driving on your money, would you know how to stop them? Yes, but only if you start before the money is gone. 3 things. Request your HOA's financial records once a year. You have the right. Use it. Search every major vendor by name. A legitimate contractor has a license, a website, and reviews. A fictional one has a P.O. box and a bank account. Attend the annual meeting as a witness, not a formality. The problem is almost never a lack of legal recourse. The problem is that most people wait until the damage is catastrophic before they start asking questions. By then, the money is in a warehouse wearing Italian leather seats. If you found this useful, share it with someone who owns property. And if you're already dealing with something like this, fees going up, building going down, leave a comment. I read everyone. See you in the next one.